During the Second World War, few names carried as much weight on the battlefield as Erwin Rommel and George Patton. They were men shaped by war, driven by reputation, and feared by enemies. Rommel was Hitler's most celebrated field marshal, known as the Desert Fox, admired for his speed, daring, and instinct. Patton was America's most aggressive general, a man who believed war was won not by caution but by relentless pressure. These two commanders never faced each other directly in a single, clean battle, yet their rivalry defined the fate of entire campaigns. And at the center of it all was a warning Rommel sent to Adolf Hitler that would later be proven chillingly accurate. By late 1942, the war in North Africa had become a brutal test of endurance and logistics. Rommel's Afrika Korps had fought British forces for nearly 2 years across deserts that punished men and machines alike. Supplies were thin. Fuel was precious. Every victory cost something that could not easily be replaced. Rommel had earned his reputation by striking hard and fast, but even he knew that Germany could not afford endless attrition. What worried him even more than British resistance was something new that had just entered the war: the United States. At first, German commanders underestimated American troops. They believed Americans were inexperienced, soft, and untested. Nazi propaganda portrayed them as rich amateurs who could not handle real warfare. But Rommel was not a man who trusted propaganda. He trusted evidence. And what he began to see in early encounters with American forces disturbed him. When American troops first arrived in North Africa in late 1942, they were indeed inexperienced. Some units were poorly led. Others panicked under fire. But Rommel noticed something else, something more dangerous. They learned fast, very fast. And at the center of that learning curve was a general who refused to accept defeat: George Patton. Patton had been sent to North Africa after American forces suffered humiliating losses, especially at the Battle of Kasserine Pass. German tanks had smashed through U.S. positions, and many in Berlin believed this proved American weakness. But Rommel saw the situation differently. He understood that Kasserine Pass was not proof of American failure, it was proof that America was adapting. Patton took command of U.S. forces in Tunisia and immediately changed everything. He enforced strict discipline. He replaced ineffective officers. He demanded aggressive action. Soldiers were no longer allowed to retreat without orders. Units that failed were reorganized. Those that succeeded were pushed even harder. To Rommel, this was a sign of a dangerous enemy, not one that collapses after defeat, but one that becomes stronger. Rommel began studying Patton's movements carefully. He noticed that Patton did not fight cautiously like many Allied commanders. He attacked, he probed. He forced German units to react. Instead of slowly building up forces and waiting for perfect conditions, Patton pushed forward even when the odds were uncertain. This was exactly the kind of commander Rommel himself had once been. Rommel recognized a mirror of his own tactics. In private reports to Berlin, Rommel began to express concern. He warned that Patton was not like other Allied generals. He described him as aggressive, unpredictable, and relentless. Most importantly, he warned that Patton would not allow Germany to rest or regroup. Wherever Patton went, pressure followed. But Hitler did not take these warnings seriously. By this stage of the war, Hitler had become deeply distrustful of his generals. He believed he alone understood the big picture. He saw Rommel as a brilliant tactician, but not someone to be trusted with strategic judgment. When Rommel warned him about Patton, Hitler dismissed it as exaggerated concern. To Hitler, America was still a secondary threat. He was obsessed with the Eastern Front and believed the Soviet Union was the real enemy. He assumed that even if American generals were energetic, they lacked the political will to fight a long war. He was wrong. Rommel, however, had seen enough to know better. By 1943, German intelligence began reporting that Allied forces were building up for something massive. They were not just planning raids, they were preparing for a full invasion of Europe. Rommel was eventually assigned to defend the Atlantic Wall, Germany's coastal fortifications in France. His job was to prepare for the Allied landing that everyone knew was coming. As Rommel inspected the defenses, his mind kept returning to Patton. Rommel believed that whoever commanded the main Allied assault would determine the outcome of the war in the West, and he was convinced that if Patton was chosen for that role, Germany would face disaster. Why? Because Patton understood speed and momentum better than almost any general alive. Rommel knew from his own experience in North Africa that modern war was no longer about holding ground, it was about movement. The side that moved faster, struck harder, and kept the enemy off balance would win. Patton believed exactly the same thing. Rommel warned Hitler that the Allies, especially the Americans, would try to break through German defenses quickly and exploit any weakness with armored thrusts. He specifically pointed to Patton as the kind of commander who would not stop once he found a gap. Patton would drive deep into German territory, disrupting communications, cutting off units, and collapsing entire fronts. Hitler ignored him. In the months leading up to D-Day, the Germans became obsessed with one idea: that Patton would lead the main Allied invasion. Ironically, this belief came not from Rommel's warnings but from Allied deception. The Allies deliberately created fake armies, false radio traffic, and phantom divisions to convince Germany that Patton was preparing to invade at Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. Rommel knew Patton was dangerous, but even he did not realize just how much the Allies were using Patton's reputation as a weapon. When D-Day came on June 6, 1944, the landings hit Normandy, not Calais. Rommel was caught off guard, but he responded quickly. German units fought fiercely. Beaches ran red with blood, but the Allies managed to establish a foothold. Still, Rommel believed the real attack had not yet begun. He suspected that Patton was still waiting, still preparing to strike somewhere else. And he was right. Weeks later, Patton took command of the newly formed U.S. Third Army. What followed was exactly what Rommel had warned Hitler about. Once Patton broke out of Normandy, he did not slow down. His armored divisions surged across France with breathtaking speed. German units were overwhelmed. Supply lines collapsed. Communications were severed. Entire divisions were cut off and forced to surrender. Patton did not give the Germans time to reorganize. He attacked day and night, pushing his troops to the limit. This was the nightmare Rommel had predicted. German defenses, already weakened by years of war, simply could not cope with Patton's relentless advance. Where other Allied generals paused to consolidate, Patton pressed forward. Where others waited for supplies, Patton took risks. And those risks paid off. Rommel, injured in an Allied air attack in July 1944, was no longer in command, but his warnings were being fulfilled with brutal precision. The Western Front was collapsing exactly as he had feared. Hitler, however, still refused to adapt. He ordered German units to hold positions that could not be held. He refused to allow strategic withdrawals. He ignored the reality that Patton's forces were cutting through Germany's defenses like a blade. The result was catastrophe. By the time German commanders realized the scale of Patton's advance, it was too late. The Allies had liberated Paris. They were racing toward the German border. The war in the West was effectively lost. Rommel, who had once been Hitler's favorite general, now saw everything he had warned about coming true. Patton had done exactly what Rommel feared most. He had turned a single breakthrough into a full-scale collapse. In the final months of the war, Germany would be forced to fight on its own soil, surrounded by enemies on all sides. Millions would die. Cities would be destroyed. And the defeat that Rommel tried to prevent would become unavoidable. Rommel's warning about Patton was not just about one man, it was about a way of war. He understood that modern warfare was no longer about lines on a map, but about speed, flexibility, and momentum. Patton embodied all of those things. In the end, Rommel was proven right. George Patton became one of the most feared commanders in German reports. His reputation for aggression spread through enemy ranks. German soldiers knew that where Patton appeared, disaster followed. Rommel had seen it coming long before most of them did. He had warned Hitler that Patton was not just another Allied general, but a force of chaos who would tear through German defenses if given the chance. Hitler did not listen. And because he didn't, the Western Front collapsed faster than anyone in Berlin ever imagined. That is why Rommel warned Hitler about Patton, not because he respected him, but because he understood him. And in war, understanding your enemy is often the difference between survival and destruction.